And I would appear to be live. There's always that awkward few moments at the beginning when you're not sure if anyone can hear you or not, but I'm going to assume people can hear me. Hello and good evening or good morning if you're listening in the States after the fact. Welcome to the second episode of State of Disunion. I'm afraid it will just be me today. Little Platoon couldn't make it. He's assured me that he can make next week and should be free to do most episodes after that. So, looking forward to having more guests on in the future. But for me, if you can stand to listen to me for more than a few minutes, it will just be me tonight. I'd like to thank anyone who watched and commented on my stream with Morgoth's review a few days ago. It was a really interesting conversation. I'm glad the feedback's been so positive, and I hope to have him on again at some point, or to appear on any of his streams or whatever. Really interesting chap. It was a pleasure to have him on. I'm obliged to say that if you wish to support me, the links are in the description, but enough of that nonsense. Now, look, this is your fault, people. You told me you've been enjoying my incoherent rambling, and some of you have been nice enough to tell me that I'm not incoherent and I'm not rambling. So you've only got yourselves to blame for this second episode, which is going to be an incoherent ramble. So much so, in fact, that I've clearly been using the general topic of incoherent rambling to introduce this incoherent ramble in the hope that it seems more coherent and less of a ramble. Apologies for any vaping noises in advance, by the way. I find it almost impossible to converse, albeit into the ether, um, or drink, and I am drinking. I have a glass of red wine beside me, without smoking in some way or another. The weather's getting warmer. I do plan on digging out my old briarwood pipe at some point and buying some proper tobacco for that. I first got it, must have been about 7 years ago now, when I was living in Woolwich in London. Not a place I would choose to live now for by any measure. But I bought this pipe because I think I was on some sort of Lord of the Rings binge, and I wanted a churchwarden pipe, which is the one Gandalf has, the one that sort of slopes down in this beautiful sort of waterfall shape all the way down to the hip from the lips. But I could only afford a little sort of Sherlock Holmes looking one. And I remember first lighting it up um, on Shooter's Hill, in fact, and lying somewhat nonchalantly in a sort of Mark Twain Huckleberry Finn fashion with a straw hat on my head, and puffing away in the crook of a tree, lying in the crook of a tree. I may even have been reading Mark Twain. I like Mark Twain. But that was a particularly good pipe session. If you're a pipe smoker yourself and you've not got much practice, because I certainly don't, you'll know it's notoriously difficult to pack a good pipe. So many of them end up being duds, and you have to throw the whole lot out. So it does require practice. But yes, I will be vaping perhaps occasionally throughout this stream. So apologies for that in advance. It won't be a particularly long stream because, having guests on, it always spurs things on, doesn't it? It gives you new topics to talk about. Thank you, Vingle, for commenting. Yes, Twain is top 5 writers for him. I'm not sure I'd rank him in my top 5. I do want to talk about a couple of writers a little bit later, but he's certainly in my top 10. Very, very good chap. Do comment on your favourite writers, actually. I'm always interested to know that sort of thing. Anyway, this is a really long way of saying that I haven't had a great deal of time to prepare for this evening, because I've been working pretty much flat out on those barges I keep mentioning. They're going well. We're entering the sort of tourist season, if you will. When I grew up in this town, whose name I will not mention for, I don't know, for reasons, privacy reasons, it was pretty much empty. Not many people lived here. I'm not sure what the population was. I mean, it's been a very small town pretty much throughout recorded history. When I say recorded history, the recorded history of the town, it's never had too many people in. And then in the last sort of 10 years, I suppose it's just exploded with housing developments and immigrants. I don't say that's a good or a bad thing. I'm just saying that's part of the cause. Hotel, we have a hotel. Why we have a hotel, I don't know, because our train station was closed down by beaching in the 60s or 70s. You've got about 60 Costa coffees, which I gather is pretty much the state of affairs for most towns in Britain nowadays. Um, but all this is to say that when the tourist season on the barges gets going, it really gets going. I think we're fully booked pretty much throughout the summer now. So there's lots to prepare because there's 3 barges in the company's ownership, and yeah, we've got to sand and paint and rig and everything. It's all very much a race against time and a battle against the weather. So yeah, I haven't had a great deal of time to prepare for all this, but I do have some very definite topics I would like to talk about. And one of them is the culture war, hence part of the title of the stream, the Kulturkampf. I mean, this is a fairly short segment. I wanted to sort of mention that one of the videos I'm working on amounts to a plea to renounce the culture war because it's trashy and turns otherwise interesting people into cliches. It might seem like I don't know, an unexpected thing for me to cover or want to cover because you may remember that when the little platoon and I, if you've been following us for this long, co-founded that channel way back a year or two ago, the first thing we were doing is sort of daily or every other day segments on things that were in the news and very much taking one side in the ongoing culture war in those segments. And it's not that I don't think you can or should have a stance in the culture war. I very obviously do. It's just that I think engaging in it t- to to any extent, really, but certainly for any length of time, is really degrading to the soul because it trades upon anger. Anger is its chief currency, and as a Christian, I'm bound to believe that anger is I don't know, a grave state of the soul. Really, it's a serious uh, state of passion, I suppose you could call it. And I've been in correspondence with I have his assurance. I've been in that I can use this material. I'm not going to mention his name, but I've been in contact with a really good friend of mine who I haven't spoken to in quite some time, who's a Christian himself, and we were talking about this because he was the first person, sort of a couple of years back when I was still a massive fan of people like Douglas Murray. This friend of mine was the first person to say, "Look, you're a Christian, right?" I said, "Yeah," and he said, "Well, the culture war is trashy, and as a Christian, you shouldn't engage in it." And I would say this to anyone really. I don't think it's necessarily a religious there need be a religious angle to it, but the Christian angle and the way that he put it is that anger is the arrogation by a created being of the creator's wrath, which is the prerogative of the creator only, and those divinized by his grace. This is why we are commanded, judge not. Criticism, in a very general sense, is simply anger controlled and projected outward, and therefore still falls within that stricture. And there's a whole lot more to that. I'm hesitant to share any more of what he said because I'd like to use it in the video essay I'm working on. And also, I don't want him to think I'm just stealing his words because it's good to put things into your own words once you've fully digested them. But yeah, I suppose this is just a kind of announcement that uh, I will be renouncing the culture war in a video essay. Don't worry, Franco Walker, you didn't miss too much. Just a very rambling introduction. And Hostman Socrates HK47 is a Catholic. Good for you. Roman Catholic, I assume. Um, I'm just an Anglican right now, so I suppose that makes me a small c Catholic. Um, I'm very attracted to Eastern Orthodoxy, but that's another topic, I suppose. Um, yeah, keep the comments coming. Thank you. Um, no, but the main topic I want to talk about today is ghosts, as the title would suggest, and it's not something that occurred to me before yesterday evening. I was watching a random clip that came up on my Twitter feed of Jorge Luis Borges. I think that's how you pronounce it. I think was he Argentinian or Peruvian? I should know this. Anyway, South American novelist who I think was blind towards the end of his life and once met Christopher Hitchens, of all people. Um, but Borges was on firing line with William F. Buckley. And he said, Borges said, English is a superior language to Spanish, Spanish being his first language, and in fact, Buckley's first language. Not many people know that about Buckley. And Buckley said, well, why? Or rather, why? And Borges explained, and it's nothing novel or original, but it was very well stated. He said, look, e- English is a Saxon language on the one hand and a Latin language on the other hand, and so for every word there's another word, not exactly synonymous word, that you can sort of express the same thing with almost. One of the examples he used was the Holy Spirit and the Holy Ghost. And I thought this was a really interesting comparison because spirit it's kind of light, it's reassuring. It's this lovely sort of spiritus, spiritus sanctus, is lovely Latin light, almost sort of fluffy, reassuring word, whereas ghost is this sort of, guttural Saxon Germanic, I've seen a ghost in the woods. It's very, very earthy. And it must have stuck in my head. I didn't sleep very well last night, so maybe I was dreaming about ghosts, but all day long, ghosts have been on my mind. Before we continue, Wyatt, hello from America, wants some books or poetry you would recommend. Well, I'm reading the Iliad at the moment. I mean, that's obviously a good place to start. For poetry, though, my absolute favorite is anything by W.H. Auden. So the weather's been bad all day on the barges. It's been, very much April showers. But at one point, as we were working below deck on one of the barges, it got pretty apocalyptic outside, and the wind was blowing a hoolie or a goolie or whatever the expression is. The wind was blowing so fast, in fact, that you could hear this whine and this whistle in the masts, and the ropes and the wires sort of clacking and clanking against the masts, and the sails flapping, and rain was lashing the windows, and this haunting whistle through gaps in the wood. It was all incredibly eerie. And so I got to thinking about ghosts all over again, and was talking with my colleagues. I asked them, do you believe in ghosts? And one of them said 50-50, I think was his words. And one of them said no. And I asked my boss later, and he laughed and said no. I suppose if you're the boss, you have to have your head screwed on. I certainly don't have my head screwed on when it comes to ghosts. But it got me to thinking, I was an atheist for many years, and some of my best friends are, atheists, rationalists, materialists. They don't believe there's anything other than the material stuff that the physicists know is out there in the universe. Oh god, the little platoon has graced us with his illustrious company. I've just seen his comment. Yes, all hail the little platoon indeed. Now, this is awkward now because the little platoon will know that I am somewhat referring to him when I talk about people who definitely do not believe in ghosts. Because I think we've had this conversation in private before, and he was very much not of the mind to believe in them. But he will know that I very much do believe in them. And the reason I believe in them isn't because I have some gotcha scientific proof that they exist. I think if they did exist, you wouldn't be able to furnish scientific proof for them, precisely because science just, examines the material universe, and ghosts are by definition not really a part of that. But I believe in them for a reason you may well dismiss as complete hogwash. But I believe in them because for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, human beings across the globe have all reported exactly the same experiences of the supernatural and of ghosts. Um, and yes, they drive down house prices because silly people believe they're haunted. Well, they may not be silly. They may not be silly, little platoon. That's the point I'm making. I'll recount my ghost story, and other people can leave comments at some point in the future if they wish about their ghost stories. I'm sure even you have one, little platoon. I was about 10. I'm not very good with ages. I was younger than I am now. I was a kid, and I was living in my old house, which was an incredibly old, quite big house, very wonky, very creaky. And I was going to sleep, or I was asleep, and I woke up in the middle of the night, pitch black. There wasn't any storm that could have made the house rock or creak or anything. It was a very still night. So I woke up in the middle of the night, and I know, yes, Hamlet is a ghost story. Well done. I know that, actually, no, it's interesting you should mention that, actually, Hostman Socrates, because I don't know of any Mediterranean ghost stories. Obviously, you've got the gods visiting, Achilles or Agamemnon or Menelaus or whatever in the Iliad, but the gods aren't really ghosts, even though they're supernatural visitations. The whole ghost concept to me is very much a northern thing. So again, going back to that distinction, that linguistic distinction that Bourdieu's made. But anyway, I woke up in the middle of the night and I knew that every single member of my family was upstairs. And the reason I knew this is because I could see out of my bedroom, because the door was open, sort of askance through the hall into my parents' bedroom. And I could see my dad's feet and my mum's feet sticking out at the end of their bed. And also I could hear my dad snoring. So I knew that my parents were both in their bedroom. I knew that my sister was in the bedroom because we shared a bunk bed, so she was in the bunk bed below me, and I could hear her, moving about in her bed and so on. And I knew that my dog was upstairs because he always sleeps in my mum and dad's bedroom, and I just know for a fact he was in there. So every single member of my family is upstairs in the pitch black dead of night, and I suddenly hear and no, those aren't fart noises, they're just my really bad, imitations of someone coming up the stairs. It was a very definite, sort of very heavy footsteps, one after the other, boom, 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 all the way up the stairs to the very top, and I remember being so petrified that I might even have passed out because I was holding my breath, that's how scared I was. And to this day, having studied philosophy and read popular science and grown up and attained the age of reason and all the rest of it, and acquired some common sense, to this day I cannot explain what could have caused that noise because I was old enough not to be so deluded. I don't think I believed in Santa Claus at the time. So I was old enough to know that something was deeply wrong with this situation, deeply wrong. Um, And that to me, I can't dismiss that. Do you know what I mean? I can't dismiss that. So when rationalists or materialists come up to me and say, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. Ghosts don't exist. Show me the evidence." I have to sort of throw my hands up and say, "Okay, you're quite right. I can't show you the evidence. I can't prove it, but I know what I experienced, and I'm not going to have anyone tell me that I was deluded or wrong about the situation. I remember it very clearly, precisely because it was so scary." And as I say, thousands of people across the globe for thousands of years have had extremely similar, disturbing, uncanny experiences, some much more, protracted and almost psychedelic almost than mine. Um, so yeah, ghosts. I believe in them. And I have no doubt that, well, I say I have no doubt. Maybe the barges I'm working on have the odd ghost as well. I'm told that one of the barges is haunted by a ghost by the name of Clarence. Uh, the colleague who told me this is the one who said he believes in ghosts 50-50. So whether he's pulling my leg or not, I don't know. But to be honest with you, the idea of a ghost called Clarence is frightening enough. The ghosts may be the spirits of men set to wander this earth as their purgatory. Yeah, quite right, quite right. Who knows? It's weird though, as a Christian, I suppose I haven't given much or sufficient thought into where ghosts fit into the Christian framework. Because I think it is a mistake that too many modern Christians make to assume that there are no supernatural entities other than God and the Holy Spirit and maybe the odd angel. I mean, Paul talks about powers and principalities in in the Bible, which is of course full of the dead walking and resurrections and so on, and Lazarus and the Bible is absolutely chocker with these spiritual entities walking the earth. But I suppose it's a theological question. Anyway, I will wrap up because that was the main thing I wanted to talk about. I will wrap up with a couple of recommendations if you like ghostly things and the macabre. Ah, the ghost of Eli is summoned to Saul by a medium in the Old Testament, and Eli was not pleased about it. Well, I can't imagine he was. No, thank you for that. I shall revisit that story. Yes, Christianity has extended canon. Well, I mean, define canon. I mean, everyone thinks that Lucifer was, the sort of warlord chap that Milton depicts in Paradise Lost, but of course, there's nothing remotely comparable to Milton's Lucifer in the Bible. Anyway, Gormenghast by Mervyn Peake, the Gormenghast trilogy. That's Gomen Gast. I cannot recommend it highly enough. I wouldn't say there are ghosts in it per se. It's not really a supernatural novel, but the whole thing is suffused with the spirit of the supernatural, if you like. Um, and it's deeply macabre and beautifully written as well. It was actually written before The Lord of the Rings was written by Tolkien, and it was published at roughly the same time, I think, or just before. But Lord of the Rings went on to become the really, really famous work of literature. Gormenghast deserves its place in the sun, or the shade, or the light of the moon, or what have you. It's it's sort of it's the seminal, alongside Lord of the Rings. It's the seminal work of sort of fantasy literature in the 20th century, but it's criminally neglected, and not enough people know about it. But it is absolutely a masterpiece. I think Anthony Burgess was a big fan of it as well. So yeah, if you like ghosts, Gormenghast. And finally, the stories of, now I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. It's either Lafsadio or Lafcadio Hearn, Hearn. Was an Englishman, no, an American, sorry, late 19th century, early 20th century, who moved to Japan and married a Japanese woman and became very much enamored with Japanese culture, learnt the language, and translated countless traditional Japanese ghost stories into English. It's a very different prose style to what you'll find in Gormenghast, because obviously, well, I don't know if this is true, but my impression is that Japanese prose lends itself to a certain simplicity and limpidity, and he's very much transmuted that into the English. So it's very simple stuff. Gormenghast, by contrast, is extremely baroque and elaborate and purple and labyrinthine, which fits its Gothic castle setting. So yeah, those are two of my recommendations. A Christmas Carol, yeah, it is one of the most macabre and beautiful ghost stories ever written. I reread it Christmas just gone, actually. It still excellent. Definitely not Emma. Yes, by Mervyn Peake, indeed. Casper, yeah, not a big fan of Casper. But yeah, that's about it from me today. I'm sorry there isn't more, and I'm sorry I don't have a guest, and I'm sorry I haven't covered anything in the news. But like I say, it's not like I won't be covering things in the news, but I'm very much trying to steer away from this whole reaction clickbait stuff, which so many YouTubers do now. Um, poli- Politically, I mean, trigonometry and, well, trigonometry. I mean, the clue's in the title, isn't it? I mean, I don't mean to malign these people personally, but so much of Yeah, so much political output and cultural output is just, "I hate this thing that someone else has done," and not enough of it is positive. And, like I said, I'll be doing a video essay on why actually the culture war is pretty bad for all of us, really. So, yeah, I hope this was somewhat wholesome. Thank you very much for listening. Yeah, it does just get dull after a while. Scooter Tart. Great name, Scooter Tart. Um, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Please do support me if you can, if you want to. And next week, 8:30 Wednesday, I will have a guest for sure, and we'll have a slightly more structured, but no less discursive and enjoyable conversation, as ever with wine. So, as I always say, keep thinking, keep drinking. I'm bound to say, keep praying, and have a lovely evening.